This is the story of Californian Don Van Vliet, who reinvented himself as Captain Beefheart, and is for me the most important figure to emerge from the rock era of the 1960s and 1970s. I first saw Beefheart at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood in 1966, and I was spellbound. I heard echoes of his music in some of the records I listened to last week, and I'll hear more echoes in records that I listened to this week. Nevertheless, no one has ever sounded quite like him, although many believe that they have. Amongst those who admit to having been influenced by Beefheart are artists as diverse as Tom Waits, Beck and P.J. Harvey. With no formal musical training, Don drilled a succession of bands into making matchless records, and some of the best of these were made with his childhood friend Frank Zappa. Those of us who regard him as possibly rock's only real genius just love him. Don is retired from music now and has resurfaced as a highly regarded and highly individual painter of the American landscape. Musician, painter, joke teller, absent friend, Don Van Vliet's your man.
Well, I was born in the desert, came on up from New Orleans. Came upon a tornado, sun out in the sky. While we round all day with the blues sticking in my eye. Hey, 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 all you young girls, wherever you're at, I got a brand new Cadillac, got a Ferrari too. Yeah, sure enough, baby, sure enough, I got the time to teach you now, bet you like some code. I got the time to teach you now, bet you like some code. Yeah, sure enough, baby, sure enough, baby, I do. Hey, 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 all you young girls, whatever you do. Hey, 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 all you young girls, whatever you do. Yeah, come on by and see me. I've been waiting to you. When you stick to me and I'll stick to you and you long and baby now. Stick to me and I'll stick to you and you stick to me and I'll stick to you.
Captain Beefheart is a man who was driven in pursuit of his musical vision to the borderline between imbalance and genius, particularly in his challenging and bizarre masterpiece, Trout Mask Replica. He's a composer who invented his own Dada-esque blend of blues, jazz, poetry and rock.
Hey, 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 all you young girls, whatever you do. Hey, 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 all you young girls, whatever you do.
A kind of psychedelic shaman who frequently bullied his musicians and sometimes alarmed his fans, Don somehow remained one of rock's great innocents. Unlike so many of his peers from the mad world of the 1960s underground, Captain Beefheart survived rock and roll. Today, however, he lives a virtual recluse, suffering from a long-term illness. Van Vliet has not been seen in public for several years and spends his time painting in his Northern Californian home. This is the story of one of rock's great mavericks, and it began in the quiet Los Angeles suburb of Glendale in 1941. As an only child whose grandparents lived next door, Don was always the centre of attention, and his artistic talents were indulged. He claims to have been sculpting since the age of 4. At the age of 13, he was offered an art scholarship to Europe, but instead his parents decided to move to the desert town of Mojave, a place that was to have an indelible effect on his imagination. Here, Van Vliet's creative talents found an outlet not through fine art, but through music, when he discovered the old blues masters.
He had dropped out of school by that time and spent most of his time staying at home. His girlfriend lived in the house, and his grandmother lived in the house, and his aunt and his uncle lived across the street. And his father had had a heart attack. His father drove a Helms bread truck, and part of the time Don was helping out by taking over the bread truck route and driving up to Mojave, and the rest of the time he would just sit at home and listen to rhythm and blues records and scream at his mother to get him a Pepsi. So I used to hang out over there after school. We'd eat the stale stuff that was left over from the bread truck, usually pineapple buns, and listen to R&B records till 3 o'clock in the morning.
It was around this time that Don had formed the Magic Band from local musicians and created the name Captain Beefheart in a jokey homage to his R&B heroes like Screaming Jay Hawkins.
Oh, somebody walking, babe. Oh, somebody walking my home. All I did was just want to love you, babe. Oh, that's why you do me wrong.
Don was a master at capturing the nuances of these blues artists and their vocal, and he could catch how Howling Wolf, the sound of Howling Wolf and Muddy Waters, and he could recreate. He didn't copy exactly, but he could recreate that sound. He had a tremendous blues voice, and basically we played a lot of those tunes back in the early days.
Oh, I'm gonna pack my clothes in the morning. Oh, I'm gonna hit the road, you know. Oh, I'm gonna pack my clothes in the morning. Oh, I'm gonna hit the road, you know. Somebody walking, baby, in my home, you know.
We played some incredible places like the Elks Lodge and even country and western bars. And you know, even in spite of the fact that we were different, once we played, I think that's why they call it, the name The Magic Band really stuck. Because no matter what we played it with conviction. We became local heroes amongst the community.
I know she's in love.
The growing teenage music market had record company scouts looking for an American blues band to compete with British bands like the Rolling Stones and the Animals. A&M Records thought they were signing such a product in Captain Beefheart.
Diddy Wah Diddy went down fairly well, but after that things took a turn for the worse. They had visions of us becoming a kind of like David Gates and Bread, you know, a pop band, which we were not. And their efforts into trying to make us a pop band as opposed to a blues band was a disaster.
Beefheart's first record deal followed what would become a familiar route, and it ended amid bad feeling and lawsuits. Meanwhile, Bob Krasnow at Buddha Records thought he'd make another attempt at turning Beefheart into Mick Jagger. But while other young Californian musicians were creating the idyllic teenage landscape of the beach and the drag strip, Captain Beefheart was already heading in a new direction. Weaving a darker musical language from the desert and the wilder currents of the blues, the band moved to Los Angeles to record their first album, Safe as Milk.
Safe as Milk was already moving along pretty well when I got into the group, but Don started changing the arrangements. It was kind of, I would say, 70% there when we finally moved down to Hollywood, and we lived in Laurel Canyon. We rented a house in Laurel Canyon, and that's when Ry Cooder sort of entered the picture.
Work on the album was going slowly, so Bob Krasnow asked 20-year-old session musician Ry Cooder to help out.
So Krasnow called me up and said, it's going to be the biggest thing since the Beatles, bigger than the Beatles. It's going to be big, and I need your help. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, we need you to kind of get them ready for the recording. And boy, I said, okay.
By the time the album finally came out, a lot of those songs had evolved to become a little bit more avant-garde and a little bit more hinting of things to come in Don's later album. That was the transitional period. And that was when I left because of those influences. And I did not have that calling.
I said, look, I'm just here, you know, let's just see what you're doing. Well, I'll tell you what we're doing, what we're not doing. First goddamn thing is this goddamn guy here, points to Doug Moon again. Get out of here, Doug. Just get out of here. You're no use to us now. You can't, I don't remember what language he used, but it was something like, you know, go away and let us do this. Another damn thing is, I'll sure tell you, you know, the bass player here, Jerry, like, he just can't, you know, he doesn't remember the parts half the time. I told him, I taught him the music. You know, I'm going, whoa, all right, one thing at a time. Next thing, Doug comes out with a loaded crossbow in his hand. Don't nobody move. He's got this loaded machine crossbow. I'm down behind the amplifier, man. I don't want to see no, you know, machine crossbow arrows coming at me. Oh, get that fucking thing out of here. Get out of here. Go back in your room. Okay. And off he goes. I'm saying, whoa, you know, uh-oh.
It didn't work with me at all. When it got a little bit too far out, a little too weird, unsyncopated, and bizarre, and avant-garde, that it just didn't work with me at that point.
I saw you, baby, walking in your intriguing undress. I knew you under your dress. I knew you were under duress. Just keep coming, Jesus, you're the best dressed. You look dandy in the sky, but you don't scare me, 'cause I got you here in my eye. In this lifetime, you got my human gets me blue. The way you were dancing, I knew you'd never come back. You were straining to keep your old black track patent shoes. In this lifetime, you got my human gets me blue. Your jaw hangs slack, your hair's curling. was trained to keep your old black patent shoes. In this lifetime, you got my human gets me blue. Well, the way you look, old lady, I can see the fear in your window. Underneath your furry crawling brow, a silver bow rings up in inches. You're afraid you'd be the devil's red wife. But it's alright, God dug your dance. He would have you young and in his harem. Dress you the way he wants, 'cause he never had a dog. And God didn't think to ask his preference. Bring your favorite dress and your favorite dog and your husband's cane and your spotted hog. 'Cause in this lifetime, you got my human gets me blue.
Go back 10 years ago, Sunbeams dance around. Go back 10 years ago, Sunbeams dancing down.
The music had certainly left its down-to-earth blues cover version days, but it had become stronger, more distinctive, and yet was still accessible.
Autumn's Child, oh, they were great. He had a couple of ideas. One thing was, if you sustain a groove for too long, it's corny. And that was bourgeois, and he didn't want to do that. You know, like getting a thing happening where you're actually in a tempo like 4. So somehow the concept seemed to be you take the raw blues elements, like the sound of the John Lee Hooker idea, the Howlin' Wolf, down to its purest element, which is just sound, a grunt maybe, you know, and something abstract. And then you take your John Coltrane crazy time signature free jazz Ornette Coleman thing and sort of hybridize them together, and this is what you come up with. Well, it's a great idea.
Too much for my mirror, she almost made me lose it. The way she abused it, made me never want to use it. Well, mend your heart and mind your soul. Oh, Chicago, she's the woman to make a young man a bomb. Well, she howled like the wind, made my heart grow cold. Made me long for that little red farm. She made things fly, she made things roll. She got me way over here and I'm hungry and cold. I remember my mother told me I ought to be choosy. That was way back when I thought you were my friend. Now I find out she's a floozy. I remember the butterflies and the sweet smell of corn and the bubbling fish in that little pond. Oh, Lucy, how long for you? How long for you? That little floozy, oh, how I feel her. She's too much for my mirror.
Just to make those tunes work was a heck of a job of work, you know. It was not easy. Certainly none of it was written out, and certainly none of it was too well understood, but that's part of the appeal.
Singing through you to me, thunderbolts caught easily, shouts the truth peacefully. Seek electricity. Seek electricity. I want this man who cool mind to bring the light to those who need to hide. I'm the shadow dealer. I'm the shadow dealer. I want this man who cool mind to bring the light to those who need to hide. I'm the shadow dealer. I'm the shadow dealer.
The record company had big plans for the band, and Rykud had joined them for a warm-up date a week before their possible big break at the Monterey Pop Festival, the festival that did great things for the careers of Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and even Otis Redding. This did not take into account Don's sometimes rather complicated behaviour.
Don had been, prior to this, and even during the recording of the album, Don had been having anxiety attacks, and he'd have to go to the hospital, and he'd drive himself there thinking he was having a heart attack because he didn't want anyone else to drive his car.
I think I'm having a heart attack. Chest pain. Stop the car. You pull the car over, and I'm going, yeah, right. Go over and getting really like freaking out, you know, sweating and breathing hard. I said, oh my God, you know.
And they'd tell him that, well, you're hyperventilating, you're having an anxiety attack, and you should just take some tranquilizers and it'll be fine. We have this set together. We're going to play about 35 to 40 minutes. Just a rehearsal for the Monterey Pop Festival. No big deal, no press, no heavy critics in the audience. Just a bunch of kids having a love in and us getting a chance to kind of test flight our set and make sure it works okay. And we start Electricity. And Don comes out, you know, beams out with this electricity, and he's pointing out to the audience, and suddenly he just stops, and we start playing the song, and he's just kind of standing there. And he turned around, very composed, sort of straightening his tie, and walked off the back of a 10-foot stage and landed on the manager.
And we continued on instrumentally. Nobody cared. Everybody's, you know, out anyway. Audience is there for a good time. They don't give a shit. Got in the rent-a-car, drove back to the town, got on the plane, came home, and that was it.
And I tried to talk him out. I was walking across this lawn. I was going, Rye, please give him one more chance. We've got the Monterey Pop Festival. Can't you just stay another week? No, can't do it. Can't do it. Can't work with this man. Got in the car and left. So that was sort of the end of the commercial thing.
And the thing with Beefheart was so horrendous that it just like, you know, it would kill you to be stuck in a thing like that. And I figured if I didn't get out of town, it would kill me.
Yet despite these hiccups, Beefheart and the Magic Band were becoming a powerful, if less commercial, unit. Beefheart had always been distinctive, but now in step with the times, he became authentically strange.
and smoke and stones, the dry sandstone, the strawberry mouth, strawberry moth,
Strawberry caterpillar,
strawberry butterfly, strawberry fields, long winged eagles slither along the heels of today's children. Strawberry fields forever.
Captain Beefheart fans were the people who had even been rejected by the hippies, the people who were too weird for the hippies. In fact, Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band came and played in Portland, Oregon, my hometown, in 1970. They played at the Paramount Theater, gigantic theater. All 75 of the weirdest of the weirdos of Portland, Oregon showed up. There's one guy that had a helmet on with a light bulb that went on and off on his head, you know, and we all thought we were weird. Everybody tried to dress weird and, you know, all that stuff. We went in, we sat there, you know, we filled up the first 3 rows of the theater, and the lights dimmed, and Ed Marimba came out, one of the drummers, and he stood there in this long cape, and of course he looked weirder than any of us in the crowd, and he held out a little toy children's ray gun, and he pulled the trigger, and he went, vzz, 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 as he said, ray gun, vzz, vzz, Ronnie Reagan, vzz, vzz. And then he went over and sat at the drum set, and Drumbo came out on the other side of the stage, and they did this big drum duet, and then the whole band came out and completely blew us away.
The Mascara Snake.
And this is the Mascara Fake.
The Mascara, for God's sake.
squid eating dough in a polyethylene bag is fast and bulbous. Got me?
Like the Beatles and the Beach Boys around the same time, Captain Beefheart now embarked on his most ambitious and complex work, Trout Mask Replica.
Ooh, light on the model, affected everybody, even Mrs. Wooden Wells.
In this house, the band spent 8 grueling months learning difficult parts under somewhat trying conditions.
Pistol showing and his little pistol toting.
There was no album contract in the beginning with Frank. Frank agreed to give Don total artistic freedom if he came up with an album. There was no money being sent by Frank, and we were basically not eating too well. And it was kind of a very lean time. I remember almost a solid month of having nothing but a little tiny cupful of soybeans every day as my meal. That was my only meal. It was very sort of, I felt like one of those Eastern mystics.
Fast and bulbous. That's right, the mascara snake. Fast and bulbous. Also, a tin teardrop. Bulbous also tapered. That's right.
I used to hang out with those guys. I lived in Woodland Hills, and so did Don. Had the house in Woodland Hills with the magic band that was doing the album. And it was pretty strange. Those guys weren't allowed to leave the house. Once a week, one guy, a member of the band, got to leave to go get groceries. And they were in that house for, I think, about 8 months, rehearsing Trout Mask Replica.
This was a transition because musically, this is probably the most important point to make, is this is where Don got a piano. So everything was written on piano, so I started writing the music down, which limited Don because he couldn't play endlessly for hours. He'd just have to play one little thing. Give me enough time to write it down. He'd have to play it a few times so I could get it right. And then my assignment was to take these parts and give them to the right players. And at first he kind of told me, like, this is the bass part. I think the first thing he wrote was Dalley's Car. But he'd tell me, this is the bass part, this is the guitar, this is the other guitar. And after a while, he just stopped doing that. And I'd say, well, who do you want to play what? And he'd say, well, you know what to do.
I've written every drum bit I've ever done, every note. I play the drums. I play the guitar. I play the piano. I want it exactly the way I want it. Exactly. Any composer, I would think, would want it that way. And I don't deviate at all. Don't you think that somebody like Stravinsky, for instance, don't you think that it would annoy him if somebody bent a note the wrong way?
Don tried to create an atmosphere where we were almost living this album. It was like we didn't have a private life. We were on stage anytime he was in the room. It was sort of like there was always a kind of a tension to where we had to be enthusiastic. We had to act as though we were really, excited about this, and that's hard to keep up for a year.
How do you teach these musicians to play your music?
Whip. A kind whip. No, I mean, a kind quip. A kind, how? Tape, with the piano, a tape. And it's very hard work, and they'll probably all leave after I say this, but they don't get enough money.
Beefheart used words like paint. What he wrote didn't always make literal sense, but thrown together in his playful manner, his phrases were interpreted as though they were Zen revelations. More than a conjurer of cute epithets, Beefheart was a verbal prankster.
Jeff's role was to read the poetry. Our role was kind of to be excited about hearing it. Hearing it dozens of times sometimes, Pina, her little head clinking like a barrel of red velvet balls, streets filled her eyes, just on and on, like, I can't hear this again.
Pina, her little head clinking like a barrel of red velvet balls, full task
you couldn't explain from a technical standpoint anything to Don. You couldn't tell him why things ought to be such and such a way. And it seemed to me that if he was going to create a unique object, that the easiest thing for me to do was keep my mouth shut as much as possible and just let him do whatever he wanted to do, whether I thought it was wrong or not. Like covering the cymbals and the drums with cardboard, and overdubbing his vocals with no earphones, hearing only vague leakage through the studio window, rendering him only slightly in sync with the actual track that he's singing on. That's the way he wanted it.
Well, that goes to show you what a moon can do.
I remember when they recorded the record, Frank had time booked in Whitney studio, and in 4.5 hours the record was done. And Frank couldn't believe it. What do you mean done? Don said, "The record's done, Frank." And it was. I mean, they basically went in there and they used that studio and did a live album. They had it so together, that much rehearsing, and it was I think the best album they ever did. Not the best. All the albums that Beefheart makes are the best. I love the man. I think Frank's good, but Beefheart's the real thing. If you want to get avant-garde, man, you're not going to find anybody that's going to get more avant-garde than Captain Beefheart.
Sugar beets roll down the tracks, sunbum bounce it off the black smokestack. Airplanes pitched up slow down the sky blue. Or the engineer's voice whistling down low. And pipe like clacks by the old scarecrow. Marching bands burn the fireman's hands till a kettle leaf fire around the belly hole. So like a bubble pop, yellow down she goes. Whistle like a steel flash stream. Hose sucked out for water. And the wheel driver sparkle like an Indian flint. And the fireman and the brakeman bent and waved his long red underwear arm. All aboard and the lantern flared and the caboose waved a green corn on.
think that if he had been produced by any professional, famous producer, that there could have been a number of suicides involved.
I think we all kind of sensed that there was something going on here that had never been done before and was artistically sound. We knew that there was a market, there were people out there who were listening to things that weren't conventional. And I was excited about the fact that we were doing something that wasn't conventional. Even though sometimes I really wanted to be somewhere else, that's sort of what motivated me to stay.
I remember that I finished editing the album, it was on Easter Sunday. And I called him up, I said, the album's done, and he made all the guys in the band get dressed up, and they came over here early in the morning and sat in this room and listened to it and loved it.
It was a double record set. It cost $7. It was too much, but Frank Zappa's name was on it, so I bought it. I took it home, I put it on. It was the worst dreck I'd ever heard in my life. I said, they're not even trying.
Now here she come walking, looking like a zoo. Hi, Ella Guru.
They're just playing randomly. And I thought, but Frank Zappa produced it. Maybe I better get over another place. So I played it again, and I thought, it sounds horrible, but they mean it to sound this way.
She do what she mean and she do what she do. Got something for me, got something for you. She shows something.
And about the third or fourth time, it started to grow on me. And the fifth or sixth time, I loved it. And the seventh or eighth time, I thought it was the greatest album ever made, and I still do. It's the culmination of, for me, the entire history of the blues, rock and roll, experimental music, and free jazz, combined with extremely talented musicians playing it, and one of the most incredible voices in musical history, Captain Beefheart. I mean, he's a modern howlin' wolf.
Give me that old-time religion. Give me that old-time religion. Don't give me no affliction. That old-time religion is good enough for me.
It's good enough for you.
Don followed this with a guest spot on Zappa's album Hot Rats, an album completely devoid of the musical turbulence paramount in his own work.
I'm a little pimp with my hair gas bag. Hands hanging bands with my shoes shine black. Got a little lady walk that street, telling all the boys that she can't read. $20 bill I can set you straight. Meet me on the corner, boy, I don't need it. Man in a suit with a bow tie neck, gonna buy a club with a day body chick. Standing on the porch of the Lido Hotel, bluesies in the lobby, love the way I sell my beat, my rats, my cats, my kids,
By now, Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band had a strong underground reputation. For their next project, they made a TV commercial, although commercial is perhaps not the best way to describe it.
Wow, in the meatball. Oh, robbery.
In plain view, it's Captain Beefheart.
He made this weird black and white Dada video. And he got a local TV announcer to, come and read it. It was very funny.
New on reprise, it's Lick My Decals Off Baby.
And they showed it a couple times on late night TV like local stations and got hate mail, got hate calls right away. Take that off. We hate that. See, people just couldn't take it. Now you would think nothing of it. You would assume it was a commercial for toothpaste. But in those days, nobody knew. And people were scared. You know, the guy had a vibe out there. You either loved it or hated it.
Don't you want to make money?
Sure.
Then why don't you go commercial?
I think either I'm too smart or too dumb. I don't know which.
He decided at that point that the music was too far out. And this was a few years after he decided the music wasn't far enough out. So he wanted to go back to a simpler sound. And that was when we moved to Santa Cruz, California, and did an album called The Spotlight Kid. Started rehearsing for that.
Gravel all around.
After these extreme musical quests, the band settled down to become an extraordinary live act, performing their jagged and argumentative music. Where most bands were following the beat, the Magic Band hurtled all about it, while the captain pointed at the crowd and growled, whooped and yelled.
Ah, yeah! All the time crying. Maybe you had a girl like this. She always certain to go down to New Orleans.
We were in a setting where we had no money again and no food. We were getting welfare or food or surplus food or something. We'd have to go down and sign this paperwork and stand in these long lines and get cans of beans and a big thing of cheese and some Spam. And this is what we had to eat for a month.
Listen, pals, give me the willies, driving it round and round. Oh, I got a boogie home, oh, I got a boogie around. If you lose your push, tush, tush, if you lose your push, tush, tush, you lose your push when you beat around. When you beat around in the wish, oh, I got to move it all, oh, I got to move it listen, battles, give me the willies, driving it round and around. Oh, I got a boogie home, oh, I got a boogie around.
I'm on a booglerize you. I'm on a booglerize you. I'm on a booglerize you. I'm on a booglerize you.
Yet Beefheart wasn't only creating music. Throughout his career as a musician, his output of drawings and paintings was prolific. He was never without a sketchbook, and his work found an outlet through his album covers.
Boy, got a boogie, boy, got a boogie,
By the early 70s, Don began to exhibit his paintings and establish himself as a serious artist.
Why'd you paint with?
Need exercise. Don't get that much exercise physically, being on the stage and whatnot. Just on the stage and sitting around waiting for this job and that job. So I exercise this way. I exercise my arm.
Why are all the paintings in white, grey?
Because I think they leave more imagination to the person observing them, because I don't like colored television. I don't. I think that Kellogg's cornflakes and television are the same thing. Colored. Black and white television, or gray and white, I think is more dramatic. More for the observer. They can put their own colors in. If somebody got mad and saw red, they could make a red background.
Beefheart, now under new management and on yet another label, made a more blatant attempt at commercial success. This alienated his regular band, disappointed his fans, and made music that was, by his standards, easy listening.
It was such a kick for us to have a record by Captain Beefheart on Virgin. We were a very new label, don't forget, at the time. My recollection was there were two brothers called DiMartino, although I believe only one of them's credited on the records. And they told us that they could license new Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band recordings, and that these were going to be more accessible than prior recordings. The records, musically, were disappointing, but even a bad Beefheart record was better than most of what was available.
Stacked. The wind blew low, the wind blew high. The stakes were low, the stakes were high. Up on the mountain. Hands low, hands high. Ho, ho, ho. Ha, ha, ha. Gotta make a move, gotta make a fly. Up on the mountain. How was I to know she was so shy? Up on the mountain, across the light, across the night, you could hear the captain's cry. Hands low, hands high, ho, 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 ha, ha, ha. Gotta make a roll, gotta make a fly. Upon the mountain. record captain, how does it feel to be driven away from your own steering wheel? Upon the my, my, my. Upon the my, my. How does it feel to be driven away from your own steering wheel? Upon the my, my. Upon the
But neither the art world nor the music business brought him great financial reward, and he returned to live a modest life back in the Mojave.
I live in a trailer in the desert, up in the Mojave Desert, the high desert. And my neighbors are coyotes, rattlesnakes, ravens, and the desert is so subtle. I mean, if you really delve into how subtle it is, it's subtle. Too subtle to I don't know, it's hard to pay that much attention.
Beefheart's relationship with record companies and managers had reached yet another low, and again he found himself working with Zappa.
Don had the ability and the inclination to sign any piece of contractual paper shoved under his nose without comprehending what these papers said and how they interacted with each other. And so his career fell on evil days because he had signed papers with companies all over the place that all had conflicting claims on his services. And so he was in a position where he couldn't tour and he couldn't record. And it was at that time that I put him in the band to do the Bongo Fury tour. That was the only way he could make some money, because he was just legally tied up all over the place.
Of course, Frank would always say that. And Don might say, I did Frank a favor by going out and being the best lead singer he ever had.
Sam wasn't showing Scout Flat Top particular about the point it made. Why, when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, this black juice came out on a hard-shelled chin, and they called that tobacco juice.
When they hit El Paso, they weren't even speaking to each other by that time. Don was drawing too many pictures of Frank. He filled 3 of those big books that he carried around, the ones he likes to draw in. 3 books full of Frank, in all positions, as the devil, as everything. I saw some of the drawings. I thought they were pretty funny myself. Frank didn't think they were funny at all.
Music from the other side of the fence.
Don would sit on stage and just draw for most of the entire concert. He would just be drawing in his art books, and then every once in a while he'd turn around and show it to us. Gotcha, he would say.
Done. I wish I had a pair of bongos. Bongo Fury. Bongo Fury.
It's like 2 geniuses together, you know, and they're both on ego trips. And you know what happens, you get 2 guys on that big of ego trips together. I'm surprised they survived the 1975 tour. Really amazed me that they did.
That was not easy, but, you know, it was only a few weeks.
Soon after, Beefheart was again signed to Virgin, who in a post-punk Europe proved to be the understanding record company that nurtured his return to form, even if sales continued to struggle.
After punk, there was a much more open-minded attitude to different musical form. I don't think he was about to become Bruce Springsteen. I don't think he was suddenly going to make a record, or that the type of records he was making was suddenly going to reach much larger audiences. I never had that feeling at all.
diligence. I think this is the best batch yet. Best batch yet. Overwhelming technique done through diligence. It's all happening from the inside, you see, where it barely shows on the outside. It's remarkable. This is the best batch. Yeah. I think this is the best batch. Yeah. Cardboard balls. You may think these are cardboard balls. You may think these are the finest pearls, but they're only cardboard balls. Overwhelming technique done through diligence. I think this is the best batch yet.
We tried very much to make records that we thought were, in our opinion, great records without having any realistic expectation of them selling in vast quantities. And when I say we tried to make the records, it wasn't that we had any influence over the musical content. I wouldn't claim to have had any input musically at all into those records, other than trying to create an environment where Don could make the record he wanted to make.
Now playing with much younger musicians, his relationship with them was more avuncular. He's now seen less as a 60s weirdo and more as a wonderfully creative musician.
The process of the creation of the music is wonderful, and it's really stimulating, and it's, to me, I think, and for most people, that's kind of the reason you do it.
puller. That chain puller. That chain puller.
A chain with yellow lights that glistens like oil beads. And on his slick smooth trunk, the tree is behind on crackling thumbs.
That chain puller.
Our wing hangs limpid retrieves.
That chain puller. Puller.
Balls shoot from its snoot and vanish into darkness. It whistles like a root, snatched dry earth. Sod busts and rakes with gray dust claws. Announces it's coming in the morning. This train with gray tubes, it houses people's thoughts.
Their very remains and belongings. That chain puller.
This train with gray tubes that houses people's thoughts.
Their very remains and belongings.
A gray cloth patch caught with 4 threads in the hollow wind of its stacks. Ripples felt fades when gray spots clash. Lunge in the cushion thickets.
That chain puller.
Green and fleeted trees blown up in the marshmallow soot that walks away in foggy circles caught in gray blisters. With twinkling lights in green sashes drawn by rubber dolphins with gold yawning mouths that blister in agony in zones of rust. They killed gold sawdust and the dust.
That chain puller. That chain puller. Oh, that chain puller.
There are ways of using the guitar in a kind of an angular way, very atypical in rock and roll. Very little distortion, very, very structured music, but a willingness to go over the top with improvisation underneath this very, very complicated structure. For some of us out there, this beat, the factory rhythm, the rhythm that we all march to, is very, very tedious. And one of the great things about Captain Beefheart's music is that it breaks this rhythm. It's ba-da-ba-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, you know, it does all that other stuff, and it gets away from that.
Rock and roll is a fixation that boom, 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 mama heartbeat. I don't like hypnotics. You see, I mean, I'm doing a non-hypnotic music to break up the catatonic state. And I think there is one right now. I just want to play. I mean, I want things to change, like the patterns and shadows that fall from the sun.
Come on down to the sea. Come on to the sea. Sing the
Ironically, it was during this late creative spell that he decided to leave the music business.
I always thought there would be probably one more tour. Finally, it felt to me, but I think that's the way that it always is. I think he just ducked out at just the right time.
but they always been right there. Nowadays a woman's gotta hit a man to make him know she's there. Other night a woman came up and hit me like I didn't even know she didn't even know I was there. Yeah, it dawned on me, man, that a man was doing a woman unfair. You gotta work for your woman, then I know you're there. I knew I had to go out, tell all of the women that I knew they was there. Now everywhere I go, the women all know that I know. There ain't no other place to go but there, man. I'm talking about women, man. They don't have to hit me to make me know it's there. None of my women have tears now. You can ask them about me, I swear. They'll tell you that's one man. Oh, yeah, that's a man. Yeah, enough about telling you this. There.
The final album, Ice Cream for Crow, was amongst his very best, but an aging Beefheart now had to face a choice between his respected but struggling career as a rock guru and his emerging reputation as a painter.
when she wears her bolero. Then she begin to dance. All the pachucos start with holding hands. When she drives her Chevy, sissies don't dare to glance. Yellow jackets and red devils buzzing round her hair hive hole. She wears her past like a present, takes her fancy in the past. A sedan skims along the floorboard, her two pipes humming carbon coal. Got her wheel out of a B-29 bomber, Brody knob amber, Spanish fringe and talcum tassels, forever amber. She looks like an old squaw Indian. She 99, she won't go down. Avocado green, alfalfa yellow adorn her to the ground. Tattoos and tarnished utensils, a snow white bag full of tunes. Drives a cartoon around, drives a cartoon around. Broma sells a blue umbrella, keeps her up off the ground. Round red sombreros wrap her high-tap horseshoe shoes. When she unfolds her umbrella, Pachuco's got the blues. Her lovin' make me so happy. If I smile, I crack my chin. Her eyes are so peaceful, thinks it's heaven she been. Her skin is as smooth as the daisies in the center where the sun shines in. Smiles as sweet as honey. Her teeth as clean as the combs where the bees go in. When she walks, flowers surround her. Let their nectar come into the air around her. Her love sticks out like stars. Her loving stick out like stars.
He was then offered a deal with the prestigious Michael Werner Art Gallery.
Well, Michael Werner said, "You'll never be respected as an artist. You'll be a musician that paints. If you want to be a painter, you have to stop doing music."
Well, the artistic style would seem to have a relationship with abstract expressionism. And Don has spoken of Franz Klein and Willem de Kooning as artists whose work he was familiar with. So I think the work has associations with mainstream abstract expressionist painting, but it is certainly not a manifestation of it that comes through an art school. And he is a self-taught artist, and the handling of the paint is not in any traditional technical way beautiful. It has that same kind of edge the music has.
For most art critics to say that the abstract expressionist movement is one that instilled Don Van Vliet's work is in fact a mistake, because most of the abstract expressionists, Franz Klein, Jackson Pollock and so forth, were urban, town-dwelling people. and their work was built on the anxieties and fractures in personality that dwelt from living in a high-octane urban environment. Don Van Vliet is a rural artist. He's a natural world artist, and he presents the natural world in a way that's much more peacefully motivated than any of the abstract expressionists that are said to motivate him. In that sense, he's one of the few people who are working out of landscape at the moment and trying to make something fresh for themselves. And that's why I think he's going to grow in importance.
He had a driver at that point. I noticed he wasn't driving himself. He liked cars. He had a Corvette and then he had a Jaguar. And so I took it as a sign when he wasn't driving it. I thought, that's curious, you know. So he seemed very fidgety and nervous and almost palsied, you know, and not well. So I thought, well, something's with this dude, you know. You move off in one direction, and I suppose he moved off and did whatever he did, but really never heard of him again until I heard that he was wheelchair-bound or sick or doing painting, and I thought, oh, yeah, he always liked to draw. You know, he had a nice flair.
I was on the stage for 15 years.
You liked being on the stage?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I did when I was there. Yeah,
Are you going to be going on tour now? With,
no, that's why I did that video, actually.
It's so hot, looks like you have 3 weeks clothes. The moon's so full, why, I had on a pumpkin. You know there's something. The moon was a stone's throw. Stop the show. I need to say hello to the crow. Like the fire piano. The moon showed up and it started the show. Tonight there'd be ice cream. Ice cream for crow. Ice cream by night. Sun cream by day. Sun ain't stable. Ice cream for crow. Crow pants the scarecrow. Crow dance a ho-ho. Crow dance a panther. Scarecrow, you answer. He and haw, laugh and scratch, ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Boss and toss. Don't shake my hand. Give me a call. Two tears in a haystack. Scarecrow, get back. Tonight there'd be a feather treatment.
beat the cymbal, we'll all assemble. Oh, how we fly. Oh, how we tremble. Cut the cake. We'll all get well. Turn up the speakers. Hop, block, squat. It's a keeper. Ice cream for show. Oh, ice cream for clothes. Now. That's it. Now you can go.
Clear Spot still stands out as, to me, one of the best records ever made, period. Beefheart notwithstanding, just a great record. I don't think that the sonics ever got better. I don't think that in some ways the songwriting got better. It's a pop record, and I think probably a lot of the critics would dismiss it as a pop record. But to me, it embraced everything that was the best of what the Magic Band was and made it accessible for a lot of people, I thought. And 30 years later, it's still this timeless 30 plus. It's a timeless piece. It sounds like it was, I played it a couple of weeks ago, and it sounds like it was made yesterday.
Distant cousins, there's a limited supply, and we're down to the dozens, and this is why. Big-eyed beans from Venus. Oh my, oh my. Boys and girls, there's people around the circle. Pictures of man alike. Beaming on me, baby, and we'll beam together.
Man, you're lazy.
I know we've always been together, but there's more. Mr. Midnight Hat-Size Snyder and Mr. Jeff Morris Pepper hit that long lunar nose. And if your wallet flop out, the women open your purses. Put it out in the sun when the night comes. You don't have to go out and get them. They'll growl with you. Shout with you. They ain't no loser. Hardly on the right track. You can be on the right track, you brother. Horse, of course. Ain't no snapper with no folly rod. Big-eyed beans from Venus. Check these out, big-eyed beans from Venus. I'll let a few out and let them pass in between us. Don't let anything get in between us. Big-eyed beans from Venus. I'll let a few out and let them pass in between us.
this is wild. Wild. So they're thinking in between us. Big eyes beam from genius. Big eyes beam from genius.
Before, after, during, and since, he's always making music, and he's always making art. It's the business world that was tiresome for him, that he decided with less effort towards the business, allowed to do more work, was happening for him in the art world. So he didn't keep banging on the doors of record companies and agents to try and figure out an income source through that, but he also didn't stop writing songs and writing music.
If you got ears, you gotta listen. All women sweat, young girls glisten. There's more than what you thought. Popping a thought, eggs extract, the shiny beast of thought. Hope this art drop proves you right. Drop by drop, bright by bright, day by day, night by night. There ain't no wrong, and there ain't no right. Ain't no this, there ain't no that, and there ain't no fight. I hope Reagan doesn't start a fight. Don't you wish you never met her? Don't you wish? Don't you wish you never met her? She's not bad. She's just genetically mean. Dirty blue jeans. Dirty blue jeans. She's swinging a sponge on the end of the string. Right on the break. She spilled the ink down the sink. Ah, don't you wish? Don't you wish? Don't you wish you never met her? Don't you wish you never met Dirty Blue Man? She's not bad. Ah, don't you wish you never met her? Don't you wish? Don't you wish? You never met Dirty Blue Jean. She's swinging a sponge on the end of a string. Standing there bubbling like an open coal in the sun. Your back is aching, but your work is never done. Don't you wish you never met her? Don't you wish? Don't you wish? She's not. Raining bad.
He saddle soaps his hair. Yeah, cigarette died when I watched my face. Just some drops on an ashtray in a wrong place. He opened my blinds and sees spiders spinning mine, and it's a shaping milk, and it's a shaping milk. Never heard it put quite that way. He shape I'm in is a wall away. They call the day, they call the day. Yesterday's paper, headlines of poach, ring of the teasing, rusty Cassidy's and sopping wet hammer, Duffy and wheezing. But the alley whining, trash can blue, children running after pretty boats, stocking pulled, gracious ladies nylon, hanging on to line, jumping on to leg, looking mighty fine. Sorrow's loud and hot, means the folks that's on the ground. Carnival ground, possum toast and crackling, with aluminum sound. Every pistol lays in sharp. Yeah, trucks inside looking like a harp. Electric bulb been out for years. Breathe the fumes, sweeping gas tears. Jesus, the color of a mile-long beard, bacon blue, red dog ears. Red dog ears. Bacon blue, red dog ears. Bacon blue, red dog ears. I may be hungry, but I sure ain't weird.
I do think he's happier being a painter. I meet a lot of people that say, is Don going to do music? Will Don do music again? And I hear that all the time. But I think he's doing the right thing. And then, you know, that's what I tell them. I think he's happy, you know, go look at his art.
With a career spanning over 25 years, Beefheart stands alone today in the history of popular music. A man who took on the popular song form itself, who invented a singular and unique interpretation of the rock genre, and who eventually left that discipline entirely to re-emerge in another. There have been many icons in the annals of rock history, yet none so distinctive as Don Van Vliet.
'Cause listen, vitals, give me the willies, driving it round and around. Boy, got a boogie, boy, got a boogie, Willie told me that, come on over to my house, and I'll show you a machine right down. Close this bottles, give me the willies, drive it around. Boy, got a boogie heart, boy, got a boogie heart. Come on over to my house, and I'll see the machine right now. 'Cause listen, bottles, give me the willies, driving it round and round. Boy, I got a boogie home, boy, I got a boogie around. If you lose your push, tush, tush, you lose your push, tush, tush, you lose your push when you beat around. When you beat around the bush, boy, I got a boogie home, boy, I got a boogie Willie told me that, come on over to my house, and I'll slow your machine right down. 'Cause listen, vitals, give me the willies, driving it round and around. Boy, I got a boogie home, boy, I got a boogie around. Boogie
push, when you beat around. When you beat around, baby.
Boy, I got a boogie, boy, I got a boogie,
I'm gonna burglarize you. 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 I'm gonna burglarize you.
two trains, two railroad tracks. One of them leaving, and the other one coming back. There goes my baby on that old train. I said, come back, baby, come back. Click, clack, click, clack. This time it sounds like it's for kids. I get down on my knees with the gravel around. I pray to the Lord that that old train will stop, turn right around, bring my baby back. Well, I had this girl threaten to leave me all the time. Oh yeah, she all the time crying. Well, I had this girl threaten to leave me all the time. Maybe you had a girl like this. She always threatened to go down to New Orleans, get herself lost and found. Maybe you had a girl like this. She always threatened to go down to New Orleans and get herself lost in town. Let me play it for you. Well, I had this girl threatening to leave me all the time. Oh yeah, all the time crying. Well, the two trains, click clack, click clack. Two railroad tracks. One of them leaving, and the other one coming back. There goes my baby down the track. There she waving a handkerchief down. My ears stand up when I hear that sound.
Get down on my knees. Pray to the Lord that old train will turn right around and never stop till I drop my baby off. Click, clack, click, clack.